Welcome back, Fox 7 Sports Office viewers. Julian Martinez here, but I am not alone. I have a special guest joining me, Clemson Football Live's Brian Knight. Brian, how's it going, man?
Man, it's going good. I mean, I'm playing your team. I say I'm playing like I'm going out there, but my team's playing your team. We never thought we would be here, so it's going really well for me.
That's interesting. Never thought you guys were going to be here because I know there's been some ups and downs this season. This is a three-loss Clemson team we're talking about, and they needed to win that ACC championship to get in. So can you actually explain that a little bit? Didn't think you guys were going to be in here?
Sure. So in my preseason preview, I felt like Clemson would go 9-3. I felt like they would lose to Georgia. I felt like they would lose a couple of games later on. Now, of course, I thought one of those games could possibly be Florida State. Who knew that they would fall apart like they did? But I felt like this was a season that Clemson would win the majority of their games, but to make it to the college football playoff, I really didn't see it there because there's some inconsistencies on the sidelines that I see that's there, and it's costed us that elite status in college football. So that we're playing in Austin on Saturday against the Longhorns. I mean, it's crazy. I almost feel like it's not really happening, that I'm going to wake up any moment. But
Yeah.
hey, the season came together. We have Dabo Swinney. He led us to this point. So, yeah, it went beyond what I expected, but I'm excited.
I think college football fans too would be surprised that this is the matchup happening because it's the first time ever. We're literally watching history for these two teams to square up. A lot of orange is going to be on the field Saturday, so that's exciting. Something I found interesting though that you said inconsistencies on the sidelines, and I know a big narrative going into this game is going to be who has the coaching advantage. I mean, you're talking about
Mm.
high flying Steve Sarkisian, offensive guru versus Dabo Sweeney, who's been there, done that, won a national title. Who do you think has the coaching advantage going in?
Well, of course, Dabo Swinney has held the national championship trophy twice, six consecutive playoff appearances, and this is number 7 for him. When it comes to coaching, you have to divide the positions coaches and the coordinators kind of away from Swinney. So Swinney, I mean, he's in the company of Kirby Smart, Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, those guys who's won multiple national championships. The problem is our coaching staff as a majority is
Mhm.
not elite. We have a lot of first-time coaches there. And we did make an offseason hire that was brilliant, hired the probably the best offensive line coach in the country in Matt Luke. But when I look at Texas, I see Texas as having more of a complete coaching staff across
Mhm.
the board. And I think that's why they've been effective. Of course, Sark is one of the most brilliant strategists in the game. So this is going to be a good one where you have a guy who's held multiple national championships versus a guy who's trying to get there, but he's coached in some massive games for some really well-known historical teams.
Going back to it, you mentioned some of the assistant coaches, right? When at Clemson, it feels like they started to fall off of the national title contender tier as obviously Brett Venables moving on, their OC from a few years ago moving on. How have they done replacing those roles? Do you think it's finally coming together?
We're still behind the eight ball, in my opinion. I mean, hiring Matt Luke, the best offensive line coach in America, we can immediately see, and this is his first season, by the way, with a group of guys who has dealt with injuries, a questionable development. This guy's he's come into the situation, not a very desirable situation, and immediately turned them around. Now, they still have a lot of growing room. They really do. But you can see the difference between elite and not elite
Yeah.
on the Clemson coaching staff. Our current defensive coordinator done pretty solid over the past few seasons, but as this season progressed, we saw a lack of anticipation for the
Mhm.
adjustment from our opponent, especially after halftime. On the other hand, we have Garrett Riley. Of course, his brother's Lincoln Riley, very well known head coach, strategist as well. Garrett Riley's had a meteoric rise over the past 12 years. He's been the offensive coordinator at multiple schools, including TCU and SMU. But it just seems like there's something between he and Sweeney that I can't put my finger on. But there is the explosiveness as far as a lot of yardage. Okay,
Yes.
it will be there. But when we get into big games, say like Georgia, it was 6-0 at halftime. It was a great defensive battle. Our offense went extremely conservative. They ended up blowing us out. That happened against Louisville in a double-digit loss. Our first loss at night at home in 11 years.
Mhm.
So we're seeing inconsistencies and a lack of anticipation of the adjustments that are coming. But the other key here as well, Julian, is the lack of experience at the position level, the position coach level across the board. A lot of these guys, this is their first job at this level. And some of them, this is their first coaching job ever. And so they're at Clemson. And so while everybody else looks at the transfer portal and says, oh, that's the issue, really, if you look at the coaching hires, the coaches who left or retired and who replaced them, it starts to answer a lot.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the transfer portal because that's one of the things people always talk about when it comes to Dabo Swinney, that he is one of the rare coaches that doesn't love to dabble in the transfer portal.
Yeah.
And I agree with, I was actually watching you talk about this recently, and you were mentioning how you didn't think it was the biggest issue, that uh, it seems to be overblown. However, every now and then you lose a guy like a Andrew Makuba, and if you don't
Right.
replace that guy in the transfer portal, that's a bigger issue in my mind. So what do you make about this moving forward into the long term? Do you think that Clemson will become a more willing transfer portal team moving into the future?
Man, that is a great question with about a 35-minute answer. So
We
I
got
know we
10
don't have that
minutes.
much. I have yeah, just a few seconds. If Clemson does not bring in elite coaches across the board, they have to go to the portal. Now, my position on the portal and is kind of like Sweeney's. I don't mind you going to the portal for supplementary players, like you. A great example you just gave. We lost Andrew Makuba to who? Texas, and we're going to see him this week, and it's that's going to be really great. The guy was extremely talented. You're going to have to go in and pull in some supplementary players to bridge the gap for that incoming talent to either come in or develop. If you're not going to have elite coaches across the board, you're going to have to play the transfer portal game. Sweeney does make offers to
Yes.
transfer portal players, but there is a question of exactly how intentional he is and really how aggressive he is to land them,
Yeah.
say, versus a 5-star.
I do think that it's more important, in my mind at least, given that Sweeney is a more of a CEO style head coach, right? Like he's not actively involved in play calling in the same way that Sark is. So I do think that whenever you're a CEO, you kind of you're in charge of the full operation. And I feel as though now that free agency is more in line with college football, you kind of have to be the GM there too.
Yeah, you do. You do. And that you made a great point there. Sweeney has never been an X's and O's guy. I mean, that's one of the things that he's openly discussed. He was a wide receiver coach when he was bumped up by former AD Terry Don Phillips from wide receiver coach to interim head coach when Tommy Bowden was fired. And everybody was shocked. It's like, who's this guy? And he came in and he started making the correct decisions, put the proper people in place. So that's kind of why people have been shocked when I talk about the whole coaching issue, that he pulled some of those people in, and now we're seeing the effects of it. I think he's going to have to go to the portal eventually if we don't fix the whole lack of coaching experience across the board.
We talked about him a little bit, so I might as well mention him. Andrew Makuba is going to be a player that I highlight on defense. In fact, the defense, I think, is the strength of Texas. I don't know what your thoughts are on that as a whole, but Makuba has been a stud for us all year. Can you describe the type of player he is and why he's experienced such a growth in Austin as opposed to his time with Clemson?
As a freshman, I think he was first team All-American as a freshman All-American team. He was a really talented player. He was, in fact, one of my favorite players, but he started to suffer some injuries. Around him, he started seeing guys like Nate Wiggins, who's now in the NFL, flourish. He had guys like him around him, and there was just something there. I really don't know what happened across the board. Our DB's coach and safeties coach, those guys have done a pretty good job, especially the DB's coach. But Makuba, it was kind of like he tapered off after that sophomore year. The sophomore year, again, he had injuries. I really felt bad for him. But to see him doing well, even though I hope he doesn't do well against us, it makes me happy because I always enjoyed watching him play. So he's had a really good season in Austin. We're going to have to watch out for him because he brings a lot to the table.
If you asked me what I would thought about this matchup a year ago, I would say attack Texas's secondary. That's the weakness of the defense. But we've seen a massive turnaround with guys like Jahdae Barron, as I mentioned, Makuba back there, really as stalwarts on the defense. How do you think Clemson will try and attack this improved secondary and also just in general a great front seven?
I think it starts with Cade Klubnik, former Westlake quarterback there in Austin. Got two state championships as a starter, 3 overall. 45-0 in 6A
You're
Texas
forgetting one
football.
important part there. One against Quinn Ewers directly.
Exactly. Exactly. So, Cade has had a rough start at Clemson, and I don't really think that that's on Cade, but I think that deals with some coaching changes, etc. But he's really coming to his own this year, and we're seeing him use his legs, that great speed of his, to extend plays and also show a great attack against the defense. So I expect us to use his running ability to at least extend a play, to get some of our wide receivers. Our wide receivers are actually doing quite well this year, and it's led by two freshmen. I look to see him extend the play, maybe even pull some RPO, pull the ball, try to outrun the defense, and then just spread the ball around. If y'all come with a really good blitz, obviously we're going to try to get the ball out of our hands really quick. The past two teams we played were some of the top-ranked teams in rushing yards allowed or team sacks at South Carolina and SMU. So we've had to go up against a defensive front that's really tough, and then kind of an okay secondary. With y'all, your secondary is very talented, but I do look for us to try to implement his mobility while stretching the field here and there and getting the ball out of his hands pretty quick.
Who has the advantage in quarterback? Cade Klubnik, Quinn Ewers going in Saturday. That's going to be one of the big things that people watch for.
Well, maybe I'll counter this question with, does Cade Klubnik have a Manning sitting behind him that everybody's dying to see on the field? I think that could make him a little more relaxed coming into this game. Of course, he's playing against some former high school teammates. Of course, the Quinn Ewers past and now present that's coming up. I think that Cade, everybody's going to be nervous except for Dabo because he's been to now 7 of these. But I think that without that push of a second string quarterback that everybody's dying to see, it might actually work in his favor. I know that a lot of people's really not so happy with some of the plays that Ewers didn't produce against Georgia, but Georgia's tough. I mean, Georgia's a really, really tough team. But hey, I'm going to take my quarterback in this. I think he's hitting. I think he's hitting his stride. I think that he and the offensive coordinator are finally getting on the same page. And for me, using his mobility, I've been begging for us to run him more in a strategic approach. Just don't throw him out there and call a quarterback run. Be smart about it. Because if your quarterback gets hit and he goes down, there's a problem. But I'm picking our quarterback on this one. Yeah.
Well, I don't think you're off base with some of the murmurs around Quinn, because they are there with Arch as well, just lurking in the background. What is the view of him from an outsider perspective fully? Because I feel sometimes here with Austin, we're like too close to the situation, right? We're very protective of Quinn as a fan base because he's our guy, obviously.
I think the guy is extremely talented, and I don't think that people would have been fumbling over themselves, not only in with him coming out of high school, but also leaving Ohio State to come play quarterback for them if the guy wasn't worth his weight in salt. He does have that ability to pull off the big play, to extend plays, but people get really antsy when you lose to Georgia twice or you lose a big game twice, because then you have this idea of, hold on, you can't win the big game. And we can think about players and coaches that persona has actually been almost tattooed on. So I can understand some of the murmurings here and there because it does happen. Cade has received it here in Clemson. I've taken up for Cade a lot. But Quinn Ewers is a very talented quarterback. He's a guy that you have to respect. You have to look at him and instead of approaching him like some people maybe who are being a little more negative would and say, hey, we're going to approach him as though he's going to make the mistakes that he made against Georgia in the SEC championship. No. That would be very unwise. You have to approach Quinn Ewers, the guy we know that he is, the abilities that he has. And then the big plays that he's produced throughout his career. So for me, he's a guy who does need to prove some things. He really does. On the outside looking in, he's got to prove some things. If he goes in and somehow loses to Clemson, okay, now he's going to wear the scarlet letter if he can't win the big game. But I still believe he has the ability to not only come in and win this big game, but potentially take Texas to the national championship.
If Clemson wins, what went right?
Our coaching staff actually coached a complete football game. The other night, after the SMU game, Coach Sweeney told the media, he said, our team has yet to play a complete game. And I want to kind of reword that for Coach Swinney. His coaching staff, especially his DC and his OC, they haven't coached a complete game all season, and this is game number 14. So if Clemson goes into Austin, which all the pressure is on Texas, y'all spend so much more money on football than Clemson really has because of budget. And you have Texas, the great recruiting ground. You have this great feel that's going on with Matthew McConaughey on the sidelines. The pressure's on Texas. If Clemson goes in and wins this ball game, it will be because our coaching staff finally anticipated the changes that the opposition made at halftime or maybe even in game, responded properly, kept the pedal on the metal, and ended up winning the ball game. Because remember, the other night against SMU, we were up by 17 points like that. And how did it end? It was a great ending, but it ended with us sending a true freshman out to kick a 56-yard field goal to win the game. There's a lack of coaching that must be addressed. And if Clemson beats Texas, it will be because Clemson's coaching staff finally coached a complete football game.
With all of that said, will it go right?
I really don't want to answer that question, but since you're kind enough to have me on your channel, here's the answer. My heart says Clemson. My football logic leans towards the Longhorns.
Fair enough. Well, Brian Knight, Clemson Football Live, we appreciate having you on the Sports Office. Thanks again for dropping by, man.
Thank you for the invitation, and this has been a lot of fun, and good luck to you guys, but not too much luck.
Not too much. Give me a Go Tigers just for fun.
Go Tigers.
For the day ones, the diehards, the first timers, the old timers, for all the rivalry matches, buzzer beaters, and come from behind miracles. It's not just stats and wins and losses, it's the moments, the shots you can't believe went in, the times you can't do anything but believe. And it's all streaming right here on your connected TV anytime on Fox Local.
The Sports Office, streaming anytime on Fox Local.